Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Executive Security in a New Era, presented by Corporate Security Advisors. I'm your moderator for today, Anita Vogel, and I'm so honored to be here for this critically important discussion, especially at this time in our lives. Over the past year, we have all watched an escalation in violence directed at both public and private leaders. Many of you, of course, will remember the brutal assassination of United Healthcare executive Brian Thompson on the streets of New York, on a busy street early in the morning, practically in broad daylight. It is really something that shocked the community and really signaled a broader shift. Then, in the months that followed, we also saw politically motivated attacks at Minnesota leaders in their home, in their own home. That was really shocking as well. Then came another shooting in broad daylight on Park Avenue at the NFL headquarters. Again, things that you never really thought you would see. And it really underscored how a public setting like that can really shift very quickly into a threat environment. And then most recently, we saw the brutal assassination of Charlie Kirk, one of the most prominent young conservative leaders of our time. He was assassinated in broad daylight on a college campus with his own security detail. This is something he had done many times before around the country. Together, these incidents reflect a broader national trend, rising hostility toward high visibility leaders and elevated risks tied to these three things: executive travel, media exposure, and personal digital footprints. We all have personal digital footprints, right? We got to think about that. These are not abstract scenarios. They are cautionary markers of a threat environment that has changed dramatically in just the last 12 months. Think about that, how over the last year, this threat environment has really increased. So now every organization and across the country, they are really asking, what does responsible executive security look like? How do you plan for it? And how do you protect our leaders without disrupting their ability to lead, without getting in the way of doing their job? Because, nobody wants a shadow following them around. So today we are joined by 4 senior leaders from Corporate Security Advisors, each with deep experience spanning federal service, corporate security, and executive protection. Together, we're going to explore what's changed, why it matters, and what executive teams must do today to stay ahead. We are going to introduce you to our esteemed panel in just a few minutes, but before we do, I want to set the stage for our discussion today. Let's take a look back at some news clips from just a year ago. Watch.
Past the hour. We got some breaking news here in New York, and we've been covering the crime in New York for several years now. Okay, this is a story that broke around 6:45 this morning, about 3 blocks from our studio. We could watch it from our offices as numerous police cars from the NYPD reported to the New York Hilton Hotel in Midtown Manhattan, where a shooting took place. We're now told the victim is dead. We have not confirmed the identity, but it appears to be a significant businessman who was either working out of New York or working in New York, and we'll try to work in and verify that. However, the gunman is still on the run, and the gunman is described as 6 foot 1 inches tall, wearing a ski mask, who apparently had a backpack. He had a clear plan to wait for this man. Because the police say he was there for several hours with the backpack outside the hotel. And then he ran down an alley around 53rd, 54th Street, Midtown Manhattan, and he vanished. And whether or not they can track him down on cameras or by way of the subway, or whether or not he had a getaway car, we do not know. But a significant story developing yet again.
The suspected gunman has now been on the run since just after 6:45 a.m. this morning. He's believed to have used a silencer. What is the information we have? What does it tell you about the sophistication of this attack?
Well, Jake, the details and nuances of this attack are extraordinary. They do betray an astounding level of pre-planning, of organization, and I should also say cool-headedness. And all of those things together would point towards a very competent assassin and potentially even someone who does this for hire.
Tonight, after the murder of that healthcare CEO in New York City, police are now investigating another insurance CEO targeted outside Portland, Oregon. Authorities say a hooded suspect was seen on surveillance firing multiple times into the home of Safe CEO Chip Terhune. No one was hurt. The CEO says he had received a threatening email.
Wow. It is hard to believe that that was just 1 year ago. I remember watching the coverage of the shooting of Brian Thompson. It took place just down the street from the Fox News headquarters, and that's a busy, affluent area, so it was truly shocking. Right now, I want to bring in our panel to discuss more about this. We have such a great panel today. First, I'd like to introduce Dave Commandant. He is Chief Security Officer and Partner at CSA. He's a former CSO at Boeing and Special Government Employee. Welcome, Dave. Next,
Anita.
we have Steve Ricciardi. He is Managing Director, Executive Security at CSA, formerly Senior Director, Global Security at Medtronic, and former Special Agent in charge with the U.S. Secret Service. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Anita.
Yes. Next, we have Larissa Ivy. She is a Senior Advisor for CSA, former Global Security Lead for Walmart, and former U.S. Secret Service Special Agent. Welcome, Larissa.
Thank you so much.
Yes. And finally, we have Jeremy BAUMANN. He is the CEO and founder of CSA. He is the former interim CSO at HealthPartners and former director at Enterprise Security at Discover Financial Services. Jeremy, so great to have you here today. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Anita.
Yes. So let's jump right into this. I want to start because we have so many questions. Dave, I want to start with you. As this threat landscape grows and becomes more dynamic, as we have seen, political polarization, online harassment, event shootings, how should organizations mature their intelligence and capabilities to keep pace? What is the gap between what most companies think they are doing is right and what is actually needed to protect these high visibility leaders?
Well, I think the biggest issue right now, Anita, is that companies believe that they have internal integration. And what I mean by that is that the security organization, the legal organization, communications, human resources, the EAP programs within their companies, that they're all effectively talking to each other. And if they were, then what happens is you have a really good and effective holistic threat perspective of what's going on at your company, because each one of those organizations receives threats. What normally doesn't happen at most companies is those threats are not shared competently across those different verticals. And so that's where the issue lies with many companies. They believe that that's happening every day, that it's happening flawlessly. And the reality is, in most cases, it's not.
So a lack of communication can lead to a dangerous outcome, I think is what you're saying, right? And, you know, we saw that with the shooting of President Trump in Butler. All of those security agencies were out there, law enforcement agencies, and none of them could talk to each other, right?
Absolutely.
And look what happened. So I
Absolutely.
think you made a great point there. Larissa, let me go on to you from an operational, actually, Steve, let me go to you.
Sure. Yeah.
Given the rise in public event violence, what does good look like in terms of readiness for a CEO attending a high profile event, which, you know,
Sure.
come on, that's part of what a CEO does. That's in their job description, attend high profile events for the company. And where do most corporate teams commonly underprepare? We heard about lack
Right.
of communication, but what would you say?
Right. So in talking about, attending a high profile event, the risks need to be identified for that event and then mitigated. And this can be conducted with solid security intelligence support prior to and during an event. You know, it's all about planning and doing a good, solid advance work. Plans need to be reviewed and then rehearsed by the executive protection team. You know, and security needs to be layered. There are very concentric circles of security within the event, starting out from the podium, let's say, or wherever the CEO is going to be, and then it needs to be layered from there. And as Dave mentioned, which is extremely important, communications need to be coordinated properly between agencies, be it a private sector security company that's associated to the event or the building, as well as the EP team. And contingencies need to be prepared. There needs to be solid preparation. Medical emergencies, egress, an emergency involving an emergency egress needs to be well thought out, and then the CEO really needs to be briefed. And I know they're busy, but a few moments with the CEO before he attends, he needs to know exactly how to react to an emergency. And then there's been some with regard to under preparing or something like that. I would say that weak pre-event security intelligence is extremely important with these monitoring social media, that's associated to the CEO or associated to the event, needs to be conducted prior to and during. A lot of threat actors will announce themselves as going to the event or doing something. So that needs to be covered. And also, when you talk about underestimating protests and activism dynamics, that's one thing that could tend to hurt a company too, because it matters if a company is reputationally damaged by a protest or something like that associated to the event, that can be detrimental. So weak internal coordination are other factors, as well as insufficient post-event review by the EP teams after an event. In other words, learning from your lessons, learning and going forward.
A great point there that the threat landscape can change just days before an event where a CEO is going to be making an appearance. And real quick answer on this. You say that a company can be reputationally damaged for these protests and something happening to one of their high-profile employees. Well, would you say that United Healthcare has been damaged because of what happened? I mean, it seems like there's, so much of the youth public sentiment is on the, accused killer side here. Has that company been damaged?
I would say there has been some reputational damage done to the company because of that whole incident and how it's played out with regard to being for the person that conducted the murder and also versus the company. So I would say yes, there has been. How much I do not know, but that would be something that the corporate communications folks at United Health would have a better read on. But there is that chance, and I don't think companies want to take that chance, quite frankly. So having a proper plan for protests and being in sync with the local authorities on how to deal and handle with those protests is essential.
Yeah, no doubt. And no doubt the folks over at United Healthcare are refiguring that all out over there. Thank you for that. Larissa, from an operational standpoint, executives today, they're more mobile, they're more visible, they're more digitally exposed than ever. What are the tactical shifts organizations need to make, whether in protective intelligence, travel patterns, cyber persona monitoring, as we were just touching on, or venue advances, to realistically manage this threat level in 2026?
Yeah, it's a great question, Anita. And I think, as Steve alluded to, enhancing your protective intelligence program, large amounts of digital information can help security teams, but they also make it much easier for threat actors to gather their own intelligence. Often executives may not realize that even if they don't have a digital presence, then their families do. And so having those conversations and briefings with executives is critical. I would say that artificial intelligence is also providing us some real new challenges. Those nagging spam calls that used to be just a nuisance are now taking on a new form by having voice spoofing and voice cloning. Voice spoofing involving threat actors impersonating trusted individuals can potentially manipulate victims into revealing sensitive information, such as travel plans. Again, just really finding ways to enhance your protective intelligence gathering program, which may include additional data points, educating your teams on what new threat vectors to look for. Again, security teams just need to stay up to date with the latest schemes from threat actors, and AI plays a significant role here. Collaboration should also be occurring, again, as others have mentioned, with your internal or outsourced security teams and executive protection teams, so that all those things can take into account during your advanced work.
Yeah, voice spoofing, that is a scary one. I'm always, on alert when an unrecognized phone call comes in, and I wonder, is anybody spoofing my voice or recording my voice? You just cannot be too careful. Thank you for that. Jeremy, let me ask you, when you walk into a new environment to advise a client, you have a new client, especially targeting after a targeting incident, how do you get across to them that corporate security for the CFO, the CEO, certain board members is not a luxury anymore? It's a requirement because it's a new way of thinking for them. How do you get across that message?
Yeah, thanks, Anita. I think the most important thing is to help them view it through the lens of the company. Executives, they come up and they don't see themselves as important to protect. They're more concerned about protecting their organizations, protecting their employees. And so until they've been in a higher threat environment, until they've dealt with some of these risks, they really don't view it as imperative that they need the protection. So it's really about reframing it in a way that helps them think about protecting their role, protecting their position, and protecting their organization, rather than thinking about protecting themselves as a person, as an individual. And then I think, as Dave and the others pointed out, doing a really good job of communicating the types of threats that are being received. In the previous roles that we've all held, many of these executives are receiving hundreds of online threats, coming in from customer service, coming in from phone lines, email, online. And when you are able to aggregate all of those and present and communicate a good, accurate picture to the executive team, I think it reframes the discussion for them.
Yeah, that's all very, very valuable information. And on that note, we're here to, inform people and for you to give your expert knowledge to our listening audience today. Jeremy, to that end, you have prepared a slide screen with 3 actions for executive teams to follow. Can you just take us through these 3 points here?
Sure. And the first really ties into what we're just talking about, elevating executive security to the strategic agenda. This is less about protecting the executive as a person and more about thinking of it through the lens of the strategic impact that it can have to the organization, to the brand, to the reputation, to the employees that work for the organization, to the stakeholders, the shareholders who have value invested in the organization. So it's really about reframing the risk in terms of putting the right level of mitigation to protect the organization itself at the strategic level. I think the second point from there is really about having ongoing executive risk assessment. So when we think about all of the organizations out there, they each have a different risk profile, and each executive has a different risk profile within the organization. Some are very high risk, others not so much. And so those risks are dynamic. They're changing all the time based on the environment, based on the economy, based on what the company itself is going through. So having that basic building block of an executive risk assessment being conducted on a periodic basis is really what it takes to help the organization determine what the right level of protection is. Finally, as we think about the public-facing activities that so many of these executives and other public figures are targeted at, these public-facing activities need security designed into them. And what we talk about with executives is that this isn't always the sunglasses and earpieces type of protection that most would think about. This is really about proper planning, facilitation, risk mitigation, some of the planning activities that Steve discussed in terms of contingency planning, planning for medical emergencies, planning evacuation routes, planning pathways to higher levels of medical care, and thinking about what steps need to be put in place so that we're reducing the risk in these public-facing settings.
Yeah, because that's such a good point, Jeremy, because as we've seen in the last year, some of these high profile figures have been targeted in public facing settings, others not in their own homes. But you have to be prepared when your CEO or your executive goes out into the public. To that end, let us take a look right now at some coverage of these high profile murders that took place over the last year. And when we come back, we're going to have a lightning round of questions with our esteemed panel. So stay with us.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Welcome to this special edition of CNN Newsroom. I'm Victor Blackwell in Atlanta, and we begin this hour with breaking news out of Minnesota. A shelter-in-place order has been issued after what police called targeted shootings. They happened in the towns of Champlin and Brooklyn Park. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz put on this message on social media moments ago. I've activated the State Emergency Operations Center. Local law enforcement in Champlin and Brooklyn Park have the full resources of the state of Minnesota behind them. We are monitoring the situation closely. With me now, CNN senior law enforcement analyst Andrew McCabe and Juliette Kayyem, senior CNN national security analyst. Thank you both for being here. Shelter in place, Andy, for you first. They call this an ongoing situation. Tell us about what this suggests about the risk to the public.
Breaking news, live pictures from Midtown Manhattan. Our John Miller reporting at least 2 people have been shot. Now this is taking place on East 52nd Street between Park and Lexington Avenues. People who work in the area are said to be getting texts and emails to shelter in place. Our Shimon Prokupez is there on the scene. All right, Shimon, just trying to understand here. We understand 2 people have been shot. What is the latest as you understand what's happening here?
Yeah, one of those people shot is wait, hold on, Aaron. I'm just trying to. I need you to back up. Okay. Do we still think there's a concern here with certain cases? Okay. All right. Aaron, I was just talking to one of the officers here. There's still a major concern here. I'm along from the press office. Yeah. No, I know who you are. You got it, buddy. Thank you. I'm at Park and 51st Street. The police here are asking me to move back because we're still facing a very dangerous situation.
Yeah, that's the thing, with these news crews. And I know from personal experience, you get set up close to a crime scene like that, and it's a lot of wires and a lot of stuff going on. And then the police come and they ask you to move back during a live broadcast. It's not as easy as it looks. That guy did a good job. But anyway, when you guys look at these events, what do you think? How has this created concern in the corporate world, and how has it changed the way executive security is going to look moving forward? And who wants to jump in on that?
Happy to jump in. I think probably the biggest initial concern is, these events this year really forced the boardrooms to look hard at their security programs and are they adequate, right? And it's not just good enough to say you've got an executive security program. It needs to be tested, and the tires need to be kicked, because just having security people going out with your executive doesn't mean that they're qualified and competent to do so. There's a certain skill set that comes with doing executive protection, and you need to be trained specifically in that. So if you are just the security leader in an organization and you take 2 or 3 of your team and you have them wander around with your CEO, that's not an executive security program. There needs to be more there in those types of programs. And I think that's what companies realized this year. When they went out and they looked deep, some programs had excellent executive security programs and had to do very little differently. Other companies had next to nothing and had to work very hard and very quickly to get something meaningful in place.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And Jeremy, I want you to speak to this also, because in case a company thinks it's okay maybe to hire an off-duty police officer to do this kind of work, does that cut it or not? And I'm asking you because you used to be a police officer, or does someone have to be more specially trained to protect an executive?
Yeah, thanks, Anita. As Dave pointed out, being in law enforcement doesn't automatically qualify you to do executive security. You certainly have a base level of skills, but executive security is about keeping the executive in a safe environment more than it is about just being a protector. And there's so many layered aspects to that. There's the aspect of pre-planning, the aspect of intelligence, the aspect of close protection, the aspect of transportation and how they're getting around. And then with executive security programs with these publicly traded companies, there's compliance guidelines with Securities and Exchange Commission guidelines for perquisite disclosures. There's guidelines to be followed related to IRS 1.132 compliance for taxability concerns. So there are executive compensation pieces, there's board disclosure, there's 10K. There are so many aspects that go into providing executive security and executive protection programs. It really, even if you're good at the operational aspects, sometimes it's the compliance aspects that need brushing up. So boards, executive committees over the past 12 months have started to realize that they really need a closer look at these programs. They need better governance and oversight over the programs. And so that's where these organizations are really reaching out for help, where we've been able to provide a lot of support to be able to make sure they have all aspects of a well-rounded executive security program in place.
Yeah, I mean, that's the, go ahead, that's the recipe, but how do you convince someone like an executive who doesn't want security, doesn't want to be bothered? How do you convince them?
Well, at the end of the day, the right way to do it is to not have it be that specific executive's decision. It really needs to be a higher level of governance, whether that's coming from the audit committee of the board, whether that's coming from the executive committee as a whole. This really needs to be an organizational decision. In our professional opinion, the least effective way to do this is to allow the affected executive themselves to decide what level of security that they should be taking.
Mm-hmm. Steve, I know you want to jump in. Go ahead.
Sure. No, I was just going to say, that executive protection teams need a reference point. And what does really that mean? And it means policies and standards and processes can provide those things. Trip events, risk assessments, as mentioned before, based on these policies and standards are really critical, in my opinion. Training standards are also very critical, as I think Dave alluded to earlier, too. So, and then a governance program that Jeremy had mentioned, and Dave also mentioning about being tested, that a governance program will test and also review and find gaps for you. And that could be conducted by a third party on a review basis, on a review cadence, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And that's important, I think, to have that second set of eyes looking at your programs and things.
Yeah, makes sense. Larissa?
Yeah, and I think too that, and it's been mentioned a little bit, just having that collaborative approach. So, having your legal teams, having your information security teams, having your compliance teams, all involved in, this decision making, the process formation becomes super important because all of them have a role to play, especially when something does occur. Mm-hmm. So I think having all of that on the front side and being able to explain to the different teams their role and why it's important can really go a long way.
There's that key communication again, right?
Right.
Making sure all platforms are communicating. All right, great insight. I want to go now to a pre-recorded question. This is from Zach Scott. He is a former professional soccer player with the Seattle Sounders. Let's take a listen to his question if we can get that one queued up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zach Scott with RGP. We provide consulting services to all industry verticals. Prior to RGP, I played 15 years of professional soccer. My question to you today is, in professional settings, how do we protect high-profile business leaders and athletes when they are in the public setting?
Okay, a little bit about what we've been talking about, but interesting to hear it from him. Larissa, let me have you take a stab at that first.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I think, as I mentioned, communicating up front with that leader and athlete about their own public recognition can really help. And then how it impacts their daily life, even if it is in a public event or a public setting. Again, the risk assessment process for those movements and those events should continue to really guide your visibility and your response. There is a balance between security being overt and being hidden. Having a good foundation of pre-planning can help you formulate, how you want to do that mitigation. And I think flexibility is key. During a public event, knowing when to, increase security, knowing when to do something different, or honestly, knowing when to leave the event becomes super important.
Yeah, and especially in the case of an athlete, if you got a game, everybody knows where you're going to be. I mean, it's well advertised, it's all over. Steve, let me ask you to respond to that.
Sure. And I go back to, I am a proponent of the sound standards and policies. And so if you're conducting an advance for an athlete or a high profile leader in a public setting, there's ways to, there's methods and means to manipulate the environment to lower risk, emergency planning. I go back to all of these things. But what sometimes we don't see with corporations is they don't have them down on paper. They're not documented. They have great personnel and they've got some experience, but nothing is documented. And so with regard to policy and standards for advances, for social media monitoring and person of interest monitorings of those protectees. So it's really goes back to that sound methods and having them documented and reviewing those with lessons learned reviews. And so, and of course, risk assessments are a snapshot too. I throw that out there too. And they have to be updated, as Jeremy had mentioned earlier too, that there's certainly a need for that too.
Yeah. Yeah, because as we have said, the threat environment can change in a matter of days. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I want to go to another pre-recorded question now. This one is from Brian Ivy. He is the CSO and Director of Facilities, Events, Travel, and Security at the Gates Foundation. So let's hear from Brian.
Hello, my name is Brian Ivy. I'm the Chief Security Officer at the Gates Foundation here in Seattle, Washington. I'd like to ask, given the pace of change in today's threat environment, how do you turn the insights from IRS 132 assessments and protective intelligence into ongoing and actionable updates for your executive protection programs?
Okay, Jeremy, let me have you take a stab at that one first.
Yeah, thank you, Anita. I think the biggest thing that we're seeing is IRS 1.132 assessments used to be less well known, and in the last 12 months, it seems that every firm out there that can perform these is trying to take this on. And what's happening is there's not really a great understanding of the environment around an IRS 132 assessment in terms of what it really takes and when it's necessary. And so what's happening is there's a lot of organizations who don't really qualify for an IRS 132 assessment, who are paying to have these done, and who are applying for the tax benefits that can come as a result of this, who, quite frankly, I think there's going to be a whiplash effect down the road because the right framework isn't being applied. These are intended to be able to provide a tax benefit in cases where there's a significant amount of expense on the company to protect an executive based on a business-oriented security concern. So this isn't, if you're not spending a significant amount, it may not be warranted. If there's not a business-oriented security concern that's been documented, an IRS 132 assessment might not be warranted. It's one of the reasons we start out with an executive risk assessment. That determines whether or not there's the existence of a business-oriented security concern that then becomes the basis for those IRS 1.132 assessments. And then that, again, requires collaborative work with your legal teams, with your tax teams, to make sure that those are warranted, they're happening at the right cadence. And it also requires, in order for that tax benefit to apply, that you follow the recommendations of the independent third party that's conducting those. That's one of the other aspects about an IRS 1.132 assessment, is that it must be performed by an independent third party. And so you can't perform these as an internal service provider, an internal company representative. And you also can't perform it if you're the one who is providing the services that is an ultimate beneficiary of those services. So it does require a level of independence from a third-party firm conducting these. I think those are two of the big things that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, wow. There's a lot that goes into this that people don't think about. Thank you, Jeremy. So, Dave, how would you say you calculate the financial input into protecting a senior level executive? How do you weigh the costs and the benefits here, and how do you calculate what you spend on this?
Well, we talked about it early on. When you talk about executives and they push back because they just want to be treated like everybody else, or they don't want to incur the costs, the reality is this is a business resiliency exercise, right?
Mhm.
And so when you have that kind of impact, whether it's the loss of a leader, the loss of confidence in a company, the reputational damage, and you start looking at the costs associated with those impacts, they're massive. And we saw that with United Healthcare. We saw what happened to their stock price. And so the monies that you're spending providing the appropriate levels of security for these executives, in most cases at most corporations, it's not insignificant, but it's not massive dollars either. It's appropriate spend to mitigate the appropriate risks that are out there. And so I think that's the key. And this is where that conversation with the CEO and or the CEO's board is so important. Because while he or she, as the CEO, may not warrant the coverage or want the coverage, the board has a fiduciary responsibility to the company. And that fiduciary responsibility includes having good business resiliency and having, solid leadership and solid succession. And a program like this helps ensure that that remains intact, thereby eliminating that type of financial risk to the company.
Would you say that in light of all of these public horrific events that have happened over the past year, corporate executives are more open and amenable to having security?
100%. And if they themselves personally are not amenable, their boards sure are. And so sometimes this direction is coming down from the board, and the CEO is being told that they're going to have an executive security program. However, in most cases, I think CEOs have realized that, again, it's about protecting the company's brand. And all they're asking is that their chief security officers and their security organizations provide the appropriate level of security, that it's done so in the most inauspicious way as possible. And if the security teams can do that, I think most CEOs are open to the idea and will support the program.
Yeah, well, that's good. Hope so. Okay, I want to check in with our booth and see if we have any questions coming in from our audiences across various platforms. Do we have any questions? Yes, we do. Okay, we have one from a Michael Clancy, and he asks this question. He says, some senior executives may eschew the need for protection, which we were just talking about. They don't want employees or peers to think they're being afforded perks or special treatment. What they need to appreciate is this is part of the responsibility of being an executive, and they owe it to both the shareholders and the employees to be safe. Executive protection protects not only the principal, but the company as well. Okay, so it's more of a comment. Thank you for that comment, Michael. It kind of goes with the theme of what we've been talking about, but anybody jump in here. What would you say is the one way to make the senior level executive comfortable that it's okay to have this protection because, looking around, they probably need it?
Yeah, Anita, I would say a good executive protection program is seamless, and it should not interrupt the business. It should not interrupt what the CEO and the other executives are trying to achieve, and it's essentially there for their resilience in a way, there for their privacy in a way, and there to get their mission accomplished as well in an easier manner. So it's all of those things, and it is. I believe it's important for an executive to have that type of security, given the times we live in today.
Yeah, no doubt. And piggybacking off of that, if all of you had to pick one single action that would improve a corporate security for a company, for their executives, one action immediately, what would it be? Steve, I'm sorry, Dave, let me start with you.
Don't drink your own Kool-Aid. I think it's important to have some non-advocacy come in and take a look at the program and make sure that what you've put in place has the efficacy that you believe it does, right? There's all sorts of things, and we've covered them, whether it's executive digital protection, the physical protection teams, the training they receive, your protective intelligence program. Is it working the way you think it is? And the only way you really know is to have somebody come in from the outside and pressure test it a little bit.
Yeah, good point. Larissa, what would you say? One thing to do off the bat?
I think using the data and using protective intelligence to help your risk assessment process. If you're not using data and you don't have a protective intelligence process, it's going to be hard to accomplish what you need to.
Yeah, just like science, it's all about the data, right?
Exactly.
Jeremy, one thing off the bat.
Well, certainly what Larissa mentioned about protective intelligence is the bedrock on a program. The number one way I think we convince CEOs and other executive leaders that the program is necessary is really in helping them understand that the executive security program is really more about the parts that they don't see. It's not about the visible parts of the security program. It really is about the pre-planning, the intelligence that's coming in, the facilitation that happens, the reducing exposure for these executives. It's all about the pieces that they don't see, the things that are happening behind the scenes. And those are quite frankly, they're the easiest to put in place. They're not as visible. They're not as high a barrier for these executives to be able to accept, because it's more about keeping them out of harm's way. And so if we can really focus on those parts of the executive security program that reduce risk, that keep them out of situations where they might be in areas of higher concern, that really is the biggest thing to start with. And then you can build from there based on risk and intelligence.
Yeah, lay the groundwork. Steve, how about you? First order of business for you.
Well, essentially all the above, because my colleagues have hit on all the good points, and I would go back to the security intelligence. If I had one thing to do for a company, that would be the thing I would try to bolster and increase. Because with my old agency with the Secret Service, we were consumers of intelligence. We weren't the makers of intelligence. We consumed intelligence in order to mitigate risk for our protectees. That was one of the methods. But that's what I would kind of use in this as an analogy here. And I think that's an important piece to protecting your executives.
Okay, yeah, great stuff, guys. Thanks for that. I want to go back to another question from our audience. This one's coming from a viewer on LinkedIn. So let's bring that in. This comes from Jeffrey Manzanek, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. He asks, what is the best way to help a company decide which executive or executives should receive protection? Great question. And what is a good metric for the cost of an effective program? So thank you, Jeffrey. We've already talked a little bit about this, but yeah, let's address the first part of that. How do you decide who gets protection and who doesn't? Who wants to jump in?
Well, I'll start. It starts with the executive risk assessments, right? You take a look at the CEO, his or her leadership team, and then working across all those functions, who is receiving targeted input, what's the veracity of that input, and how legitimate is that input. And once you can take a look at that and then build that in also to the resiliency of the corporation, there may be an executive who is not receiving a lot of those types of things, but their position in the company is highly, highly valued and necessary. And the CEO or the board makes a determination, even without any data supporting it, that they want some of that protection provided to that person too. All of those things factor into it. One of the best metrics that you can use is efficiency. So a lot of the times the executives will balk at the cost of it. And yet if you can show the amount of efficiency that you can build into that executive's day by having an executive protection team supporting them, whether they're out on the road or just going about their normal daily business, you can generally show anywhere between an hour to 2 hours of increased efficiency every day. And when you take their annual compensation and you multiply that across what your executive protection program costs each year, it's pretty good value for that executive and that executive team.
Yep. Good point on that. And that's my next question. And anybody jump in. What should this cost? I mean, let's talk real dollars and cents here. Okay. You have an executive making X number of millions of dollars a year with a salary and a bonus and an equity program, all of that. Okay. So what does his protection package cost? Let's jump in.
I mean, Anita, it's such a wide range, I would say, of what a program should cost. You've got programs that cost in the millions of dollars. The graphic that was shared on Fox News in the wake of the Brian Thompson murder highlighted some of the organizations that are spending millions of dollars protecting their executives. But I think that does a disservice to other organizations that don't need to be spending millions of dollars to protect their executives. A basic risk intelligence program for executives can be a five-figure or a low six-figure program, and it can have an incredible positive impact on the productivity of the executive, on risk reduction for the organization. And so there is a very wide range of dollar amounts that provide an effective executive security program for organizations. And so there isn't really a one right dollar amount that's necessary for each organization. It's unique to organizations. And so that's really the importance of conducting that executive risk assessment, understanding the risk tolerance of the organization, what the impact would be for that specific executive if something happened to them, and then making a determination as to what the right level of efficiency based on what you can get based on the specific security program you're investing in. So it's not as simple as saying, we should be spending X number of dollars per executive for executive security. As much as people would like to simplify it and break it down to that, it's really much more effective to look at the specific organization, what their culture is, what their risk tolerance is, and help them design a program for the organization that's right for them.
Well, I think that's great news. Depending upon what the budget is of your own particular organization, it's not a one size fits all. That's a great point, Jeremy. And go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, no, I was just going to echo, what Jeremy's saying. It's a risk-based approach, and it's different for the various executives that we've assessed in the past, and it all starts with that assessment. That executive risk assessment and determining what needs to be provided to that executive. So,
yeah,
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to agree as well, because I think part of the original question was around, how do you know which executives should receive protection? And I think that protection could differ by executive too. I think, every executive at an organization does not have to have all in. It just might be varying levels of how you want to approach each one.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's a great point too. I want to finish up with a lightning round here for a new question. If you could change one misconception that executives or boards have about security, what would it be, and why do you think that misunderstandings can create actual risk, real risk? Let's do a lightning round, and let's start with Dave.
I think it's just a general lack of understanding of what the security organization does, what they're responsible and accountable for. And sometimes that's a factor of the chief security officer himself or herself not being effective in articulating what the role of that organization is. Sometimes, unfortunately, it's organizational design. The security organization has been seconded several levels deep in an organization that they don't get the visibility that they need. And therefore, the senior leadership many times doesn't really understand what gets accomplished.
Mm-hmm. And Larissa, let me just piggyback off of that. When you talk about the security plan, what's important nowadays? Is it actual manpower in terms of private security detail? Is it cameras? Is it what is it?
I think it's all of the above. And I think it just really does depend on the risk assessment, and it depends on what the organization has at their disposal and whether or not they want to outsource some of that. It could be anything. It really has to go along with the risk assessment, the actual event. It may vary by event.
Yeah. And Jeremy, would you say that? I mean, for any specific individual corporate leader, the plan is going to look so different, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's going to be general tool sets that any organization is using to protect their executives to be able to monitor for that risk. But the biggest misconception out there is that all executive security is is the sunglasses and earpieces, the personal protection. And so I think the biggest misconception to dispel is helping boards, executive committees understand that there is a business focused approach to executive security that focuses more on keeping people out of harm's way than it ever does before we're applying some of the more elevated levels of security, like close protection, armed people that are escorting executives. Those types of things are reserved for the higher risk executives, the higher risk situations. And when we really take a look at the aspects of an executive security program that are business aligned and help the organization move forward, sometimes these misconceptions have been because some of the organizations out there who do this work only know how to apply some of the more tactical tool sets. And there's a big opportunity to be able to reframe executive security in a much more business aligned approach. So that'd be the one misconception that I'd want to focus on.
Yeah, good one. And just in wrapping up, Steve, I mean, like, if
Yeah.
you have an executive walking through the streets of New York today, I mean, there's a protest today out there.
Right.
What do you do? What do you
Right.
do to protect your employee, your leader,
Well,
corporate leader? He just wants to go to lunch and grab a hot
of
dog, and
course,
he's in the
of
middle of
course.
a protest.
Right. And well, you should know about that protest beforehand. If you have good security intelligence, those things and geopolitical fencing of events and locations where that CEO is going to, that should be pretty well understood beforehand. So it's proactive in a way that you need to move that person away from that and give them other recommendations for locations for dinner or lunch or whatever. But I would say one real quick thing is that CEOs and senior leaders have kind of become political symbols in a way, intentionally or not. Threats can come from ideological motivated individuals. Protests, they face protests at their homes and offices, and targeting due to corporate decisions, DEI, climate, animal rights, geopolitical issues that where their companies are located. So this certainly broadens the threat landscape beyond the traditional criminal risk. So and that's one thing that's changed. Security is always evolving. So.
Yeah. It all those things you mentioned, they all come into play, don't they?
Sure.
Okay, as we wrap up here, I want a one word from each of you that you're going to leave our audience with today about something they can think about with corporate security. And I think in the beginning, Steve, you said communication, right?
I think that was David, but
David,
David's
sorry,
right.
okay.
David's right on, spot on. Communication is essential, and that's been shown. And if you don't have that, things can break down fast, and nobody knows what's going on quickly.
That communication is always key. Larissa, what's your one word to the audience?
One word: intelligence.
Okay, yeah, you got to have that. Jeremy?
I think it's about resilience, thinking about it in terms of the organization itself, not just the individual.
Yeah, resilience is what it's all about. And Dave, what would you say other than communication?
I'm going 2 words: repeatable process.
Repeatable process. Does that mean practice makes perfect?
It means document what you do and do what you document.
Okay, I love it. Thank you all so much to the panel for sharing your insight today. It's tactical, it's valuable, it's topical, it's relevant, and it is very, very important. Thank you so much for all of that insight and real world wisdom. And thank you to our audience joining us from YouTube and LinkedIn and other places. Thank you for tuning in. Unfortunately, the rising threat environment demands that organizations think about executive security strategically as a business critical investment that protects people, reputation, and continuity. We really hope this discussion helps you take concrete steps moving forward. On behalf of CSA, stay safe, stay prepared, and thank you for joining. And stay with us for just a few more minutes. We want to show you a video prepared for you by CSA. Good night, folks. Have a good evening.
We are forming corporate security advisor, CSA, really with a focus on looking at security from a business perspective, not just solving a security problem, but helping solve a business problem.
Our core principles are trust, transformation, expertise, and partnership. We're a high trust organization, and that goes from how we function internally to how we interact with our clients in the marketplace.
We've got 50 consultants, most of them former chief security officers of large corporations who have collectively thousands of years of experience, that they're able to bring that to the table and help CSOs work through any issue they might have. And not just the tactical side of it, but more importantly, the business side of it.
Whether we're supporting a client through fractional CSO or virtual security team engagements, everything is customized to meet their needs. Whether it's a small or large engagement, whether it's virtual or on-site, we will make sure that our offering fits their culture and fits their needs.
Our depth of experience spans many different industries, many different verticals. So we have people who are experienced in pharmaceuticals, the defense industry, the utility industry, the financial industry.
CSA provides some things that other consultancies do not, primarily a relationship. It's not a one and done. It's a desire to partner with clients in a way that drives long-term value.
The mission and values and purpose of CSA has never changed since day one. Bring that depth of experience and all of the depth of their years of experience to all of our clients.
The biggest thing that we want clients to feel after working with CSA is that just the resounding level of comfort in the new program that they have. What we commit to our clients is that the services that we offer provide values that are whole digit multiples, bringing returns back to their organization.